Is it? And with that, we're going to kick it over to Cindy and Sal. Thanks so much for being with us. The floor is all yours for your openings as well.
Cindy's going to go for 9 minutes, then me for 3.
You bet.
Again, thank you to James, Aron, and Dr. Chris for making this discussion possible. Consider the title of this article by evolutionary biologist John J. Welch. What is wrong with evolutionary biology? Welch's article is just a partial laundry list of the problems with evolutionary biology. We hope to show tonight that he did not even scratch the surface of those problems. Consider also Jerry Coyne, author of Why Evolution is True. Coyne states, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics. We emphatically agree with Coyne in putting physics at the top and evolutionary biology at the bottom. I'm sorry, my evolutionary friends, we do still love you. For example, in physics, here are Maxwell's equations for classical electrodynamics. These relate electricity, magnetism, and optics. These equations also led to Lorentz Einstein's theory of special relativity. Without our modern understanding of electromagnetism, represented by these equations, there would be no modern electronics, no modern cars, no spark plugs, no airplanes, computers, phones, light bulbs, etc. We cannot live modern lives without scientists accepting Maxwell's equations of physics. But I'm sorry to disagree with Dr. Chris. We can study biology without accepting evolution at all. Biology is the study of structure and function of living things. Structure and function, I believe, scream design, purpose, foresight, and planning. Why is evolution believed? It is somewhat like this picture of a pencil dipped in water that appears to be bent, and this diagram representing what ancient man believed was a geocentric universe. Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, said, "The great tragedy of science is the slaying of a beautiful hypothesis by an ugly fact." Or in our opinion, the slaying of an ugly hypothesis by a beautiful fact. These optical illusions created misconceptions that were finally destroyed by facts. The pencil is not bent, and the earth is not the center of the universe. Stephen Jay Gould asked the rhetorical question, did he, that is God, create life to mimic evolution and test our faith thereby? Francis Collins also argues that to deny evolution would make God a great deceiver. This is like insisting the pencil is bent because we assume God would not make optical illusions. But this is a logical fallacy. The real question is whether the pencil is bent or not. The metaphor of the bent pencil applies to evolutionary biology. There are many things in biology which could give us the illusion of natural evolution. For example, ALU elements, junk DNA, pseudogenes, etc. Sal's going to take that further during open dialogue. Darwin supposed a nested hierarchy similar to this tree of life diagram from the Smithsonian. To many people, the grouping of life forms appears to conform to that tree of life diagram because of morphological and genetic similarities. For example, all living organisms are made of cells. So the appearance can be that we must have all come from a first cell. Additionally, 99% of living organisms use the same genetic code and the same DNA alphabet, A, C, T, and G. However, remember, things are not always as they appear. For the sake of argument, let's say there is a universal common ancestor, a first life form. That first life form would still require a miracle. According to Virchow's principles, cells only come from pre-existing cells. This begs the question, where did the first living cell come from? We understand, I Abiogenesis is not the same as evolution. However, there would be no evolution without the miracle of abiogenesis, because there's no evolution without life. Therefore, evolutionists, you are not off the hook on the origin of that first life. Some scientists deal with the abiogenesis question by appealing to multiple universes. Some appeal to aliens, because they know that all life requires a parent or a seed. In addition to the fact that evolution cannot even get started without the miracle of the first life, the next problem is the origin of major protein families. Major protein families are so vastly different, both in shape and sequence. It's clear from diagrams such as this, there is no universal common ancestor for the major protein/gene families. The major protein families and many taxonomically restricted protein families would require events indistinguishable from miracles of God. The question is fundamentally whether complex life emerged by miracles or by no miracles. We can examine this more in open dialogue. So far, we have assumed, for the sake of argument, that the Earth is billions of years old and that common descent is true, in order to show that evolutionary theory, however you define it, will still fail on the most important issue, namely the emergence of, as Darwin said, quote, organs of extreme perfection and complication, end quote. Though Sal and I believe in young Earth, we acknowledge unexplained problems like geomagnetism, radiometric dating, speed of light, and the distant starlight problem. We have not emphasized these today in the interest of time. But if the Earth is young, then there would be no universal common descent, because there would not be enough time to evolve everything from a primordial cell. So this raises the question, for some, why then would God make creatures similar to us, like chimps? The answer we're putting on the table is that God created these patterns of similarity to facilitate scientific discovery and medical research in this intelligently designed but also cursed world. Creationists should thank God every day we have body parts that resemble the body parts of, quote, model organisms, as seen in this diagram. We claim that through these model organisms, we can understand that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, as it says in the Psalms. If we did not have these designed model organisms, we would have to resort to dissecting humans rather than fetal pigs, rats, chimps, or squids. We are different enough from chimps that if the Earth is young, it would be evident we do not share a common ancestor, but are rather separate creations. But we are similar enough to chimps that chimps can serve as a model organism for scientific and medical research. We can do medical research just as well, if not better, assuming common design by God, rather than assuming common descent with no God. Take it away, Sal.
And thank you, CIndi. Some of the problems that I will point out, we can discuss it in the free discussion, are problems with the transition from prokaryote to eukaryote. I deal with diagrams like this in the origin of eukaryotic chromatin. And this is just all the machinery involved in double-stranded break repair for eukaryotic chromatin. The number of simultaneous events and things that have to be there for this to work just boggles the mind. If not in the theological sense, it would be a miracle in the statistical sense. Gradual pathways do not at all seem reasonable, and that is subject somewhat to experiment. There's also the problem of the membrane-bound nucleus of the eukaryote. This would involve just so many things that it just boggles the mind in terms of the complexity. There would have to be the membrane-bound organelle plus all the ports like the nuclear pore complex, the import-export machinery involved, the gatekeepers, and then things called nuclear localization signals. I have diagrams on that, and also translocation processes. I've had the privilege to work with Dr. John Sanford. He is a Cornell research professor, retired. His invention, the gene gun, has fed starving billions. He represents the unsung creationists that you don't hear of. He is published in all sorts of venues, including the prestigious scientific journal Nature. He published in the Journal of Mathematical Biology. I've had the privilege of being his colleague and worked for him. This theorem that they published set records in the Journal of Mathematical Biology. I have then worked with them on the population genetics of this. Natural selection does not work according to what you think it does in the textbooks. The elite know that it's kind of a failing paradigm, and we can cover that. He was invited to the National Institutes of Health to talk about this problem. We are decaying. And there are all sorts of other things. There, as far as mechanism, we do have on the table by various physicists that God exists as a possibility. And I would just say that argument by contradiction is not an argument from ignorance. How improbable does something have to be? How complex before we begin to entertain the possibility that it was a divine miracle? We can scientifically argue from probability. That's well within the bounds of science. If we're willing to be speculative, we could invite this conception of God just straight from quantum mechanics without appeal to any sort of theology. This leads to testable predictions about the human genome decaying, the destiny of the biosphere, the destiny of civilization. So I look forward to the free discussion, and I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for those openings.
Большой коробку открывай.